Welcome back, everyone. In 2015, Bernie Sanders said, "Open borders, it would make everybody in America poorer. You're doing away with the concept of a nation state. Bring in all kinds of people, work for $2 or $3 an hour. I don't believe in that. I think we have to raise wages in this country. I think we have to do everything we can to create millions of jobs." You know what youth unemployment is in the United States of America today? You think we should open the borders and bring in a lot of low-wage workers? Or do you think maybe we should try to get jobs for those kids? His political group, Our Revolution, has just fired our friend Tezlyn Figaro for saying basically the same thing. Tezlyn joins me now. Tezlyn, so great to see you. Thanks for being with us tonight. As I just said, good friend of the show. We don't always agree, but we always love the conversation. Just tell us what happened this week.
Well, you know, it's really unfortunate. Some comments that I've made prior to joining Our Revolution was dug up, was saying that, you know, me being a former staffer, working for the largest staffing firms in the world, first and third largest staffing firm, I put over 300 people to work on my own payroll. So I was expressing a view on what people have experienced, particularly the African-American community, on what they've experienced as far as not being have access to jobs, not going on what I heard, Steve, but going on what I know. So because I made that comment, there were a few people within the organization that did not agree and felt that it did not play into today's talking point, political talking point. And instead of talking about the issue at hand, which is the same thing that you are absolutely correct that Senator Sanders said, that we have to do something about immigration, not being against immigrants, certainly not being against people who are in this country now who are suffering with the separation of their children, but certainly also saying that it is important that we also talk about the people of this country, the people who are suffering now. You know, Congressman Barbara Jordan said the same thing, who's from Houston, Texas, where I'm at now. Even Senator Barack Obama said the same thing before he became president. So it seems that Democrats have lost their way with not being able to balance both conversations to talk about Americans, particularly the African-American community, which is why Tom Perez is now apologizing to black women. So they're full of apologies, but yet have done nothing to actually work on the policies and the principles that matter to people like myself.
And Tezlyn, it's so interesting to me that the shift, you know, from, as we've just agreed, what the Bernie Sanders was saying in 2015, even during the course of the 2016 campaign, you could feel that he was pulling back from some of that argument as he realized that in the Democratic Party today, you can't get anywhere unless you really sign up to this open borders ideology, which is basically blesses any kind of immigration without limit. What do you think lies behind that shift in the party? You're inside of it, you're in these conversations. What's driving this?
Well, I mean, I would just say, just like hip-hop says, it's all about money, power, and respect. And the squeaky oil always gets the wheel. Unfortunately, even though African-Americans certainly agree with what I said, the message hasn't been brought out to them because, to be quite honest with you, the left-wing media just doesn't want to cover it. You know, I'm criticized for coming on Fox News, even though I'm standing up for African-Americans, called a racist, even though it's impossible to be a racist to be black. But the reality is, it's all about who is going to scream the loudest. And African-Americans have been screaming for a very long time. We've been screaming, we've been shouting, we've been marching. So the group has become disenfranchised and really just kind of over it. They don't no longer believe in politicians or politics. So that group of folks haven't got the same respect. And because we pride ourselves on voting over 90%, 95% Democrat Party, it is of lesser value. That is why Tom Perez apologized to black women. But I'm here to tell black people, black women, to vote independent, be independent, make them actually come for our vote. The days are over for just being the mistress. And so until we demand that type of respect and say that I am okay with it, means if I lose a contract, I'm fine with that, because what I call this is the consequences of consciousness. And I've had elders who have gone before me who have endured much worse.
Tezlyn, thanks so much for that. Just stay with us. I'm just going to get Richard and Lisa their reaction on this. This issue of the tension between uncontrolled immigration and its impact on workers, jobs and incomes. It just seems like that argument has gone all one way in the Democratic Party today.
Well, I don't think you can characterize the Democratic Party as one thing or another, because I think Tezlyn makes a good point, right? That, you know, we need to be working on rebuilding communities like Baltimore, rebuilding communities like Detroit, rebuilding communities like Chicago. And what those communities need more than ever is they need investments and they need politicians and leaders that get it. But that also, with that being said, they can also benefit from not building a wall on our southern border, because that money can go to being invested in Chicago, right? And the one group that is the most, that finds the wall to be the most heinous thing ever is African Americans. If you look at any poll, African Americans find the wall to be a waste of money, because that money can go to rebuilding Chicago, or rebuilding Detroit, or rebuilding Baltimore, or rebuilding Miami.
Yeah, the money. Okay, you got the money point, but which I think a lot of people would contest. But just on the issue of immigration and controlling immigration in the interest of protecting American workers, the kind of argument Bernie Sanders made, Tezlyn makes. You can't. It's gone from the Democratic Party, isn't it?
Well, I would say, one, real quick, we've seen historic lows for African American unemployment and Hispanic unemployment under this president. I would also say you can label the Democrat Party as one thing, and I would label them as intolerant, as evidenced by Tezlyn being fired because she had a differing point of view. Basically, the left operates in a mob mentality. If you don't share that belief, then they try to shut you down. They fire you. Case in point there. But back to your point regarding immigration, Democrats have done a complete 180 on this topic because, as Tezlyn pointed out, President Obama in his book Audacity of Hope essentially made that same argument that excessive influx of illegal immigration hurts low-skilled workers. President Obama literally wrote that, and it was back in the day, not even back to 2006, where Senator Dianne Feinstein was saying things like Democrats are solidly behind defending our borders and border security, and now it's the complete opposite.
And it's funny, I mean, that Obama, it's so true. I've said that to Democrat friends of mine, and they said, oh yeah, of course, Obama, he's a restrictionist, and so we got no time. Just last word to Tezlyn. I'd just like to see if you got any thoughts based on what Richard and Lisa have said, or just wrap it up for us, Tezlyn.
Well, I agree with a lot what both the panelists said. I mean, when we talk about the financial point about, it's not important to spend the money on building the wall, but also spending the African-American community. Before President Trump ever talked about building the wall, the money wasn't spent in the African-American community. We certainly know there's those of us who have been working on the left side. I'm speaking again from being an employer myself, signing the front of the check, putting second-chance citizens back to work. I'm really sick and tired of one thing, sweeping this constant hypocrisy under the rug. I'm not saying that Republicans get a pass because there's work to do there too. But it's the Democrat Party that comes around to the churches. It's the Democrat Party that asks for our votes. It's the Democrat Party that we've been loyal to. And so those are the ones that we have to hold accountable. And this has been way before Trump has gotten in office. And it's just time that we actually stand up and speak up for ourselves and demand that they have our vote. And I want to say one last thing. I have never been against anybody. I'm a veteran, a U.S. veteran of this country. And I'm offended when someone says I'm against anybody. I was willing to die for everybody. But I have a problem when we still have children who are sleeping on cement floors here in Houston, Texas for Hurricane Harvey, but yet we're also concerned about migrant children sleeping on cement floors too. So if we're concerned about children on cement floors, let's get them all off the floor and let's start by building each other up, Americans as well as migrant communities.